Okay, welcome back. It's been quite a break. We're getting back. We will get back to the travelogues, but first we have another translation issue to kind of get off my mind. If translation issues aren't your cup of tea, I won't be offended. That's okay. You can go help yourself to a cup of coffee. So we're going to focus in this morning on the book of James, James chapter 3, verse 17, where James writes to us in chapter 3, verse 17, "The wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere." So before we focus in on that, let's talk a little bit about who James was. He is one of the younger brothers of Jesus, and we know from the Gospel of John, chapter 7, that during Jesus' earthly ministry, his brothers did not believe in him. And then something very radically happened about the time of Jesus' death and resurrection. In fact, Paul mentions in 1 Corinthians 15 that after his resurrection, Jesus appeared to various people and to James. And apparently that was a radical turning point for James and some of the other earthly brothers of Jesus, because in Acts chapter 1, when the 120 are gathered in the upper room, it's mentioned that the disciples are there, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul talks about, don't I have the right to travel with a sister as wife, as Peter does, and the brothers of the Lord. So they not only became Jesus followers, but they became traveling apostles after that radical moment of the crucifixion and the resurrection. And in fact, in Acts chapter 12, we see the transition of the leadership of the Jerusalem church pass from Peter to James. And by the time you get to Acts chapter 15, James is actually acting as the kind of the chairman, we would say, of the Jerusalem church. Interesting name. His name is actually Jacob. Jacob, named after the patriarch, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Yaakov in Hebrew came as Jacobus in Latin, and then for some reason in Latin the spelling shifted a little bit from Jacobus to Jacomus with an M, and then when that came into to English, somehow that became James. But his real name is Jacob, and it's a very honorable name, very important Old Testament name. Now, the interesting thing about that name is, when you think of King James of England, James I, for example, who is James VI of Scotland, became James I of England. If you look at the era of his monarchy, it's called the Jacobean era. So even though the personal name has been shortened and anglicized, the adjective retains the longer form. Jacobean, obviously from Jacobus, a more original form of the name. It's funny how that happens. Happens in other contexts also. You might know that there's a city in Italy known as Naples. Its original name was Neapolis, means new city, a common name in Greek, the Roman world. But you say Neapolis often enough, you get tired of it, and just say Naples. It's a shorter form of Neapolis. Interestingly enough, in the same way, in that situation, the adjective carries the longer form. So if you go to Naples and say, I want Naples-style pizza, it's Neapolitan pizza. Or Naples-style ice cream is Neapolitan ice cream. So the adjectival form retains the longer form, more original form of the name, even when the normal name of the city has been shortened and compressed. Something a little bit similar happened with James. So when you think of him, for example, in chapter 1, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. Well, his very name is the ancestor, reminds us of the ancestry of the 12 tribes, Jacob himself. He touches on the idea of wisdom in chapter 1, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. James is, in many ways, a wisdom book. In fact, where I went to seminary, the course on the book of James was taught by one of our Old Testament professors who was a specialist in the book of Proverbs. Also had a friend who did a doctoral dissertation on the sayings of Jesus in the Epistle of James, because it's very similar to some of Jesus' teaching, for example, the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. So it's wisdom literature, guide for living. But now in chapter 3, he actually gets down to defining for us what true wisdom looks like. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. And then verse 17, the wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure, peace-loving, considerate, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Now it's that open to reason word that I want to focus on. The word is elpathes, E-U, and then pathes. That's that little E-U prefix. We have it in English. Eulogy is kind words or good words that are spoken. Euphonium is an instrument that produces a pleasing or sweet sound. Euphoria is a pleasant or elevated feeling, so it's obviously a positive thing. Patho is from the verb to persuade. So it means something about being persuaded, and it's a positive trait. Now that it comes down to, does it mean something like easily persuaded, or does it mean something more like appropriately persuaded? In other words, when the evidence is strong, you are persuaded, otherwise not. Our good old friend Tyndale, back in 1520, translated it as easy to be entreated. Hard to know what that means. King James followed that, easy to be entreated. In 1901 ASV, they rethought KJ from ground to top, but they stayed with this one. Interestingly enough, 1946 RSV shifted, and they went with open to reason, which I think is the right translation here. Open to reason. In other words, when the reason is strong and good, yes, you will be persuaded. If the reasons are not strong, you won't be persuaded. This is wisdom. And I'm quite unhappy with some of the more recent translations that go back to submissive, because I think that makes it sound like, oh, you're just blown about by every wind of opinion that's in the air. And I don't think that's at all what wisdom is. I don't think it's what James means. So I'm happy to see the RSV and the ESV and the New English Bible all go with wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. So, well, in any case, may the Lord bless you with good wisdom for the challenges and the things that are going on in your life this week. So, good. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again when we get back to the travelogue. We're working toward going to Smyrna now.